It's official. Europeans are the hottest people on the planet, and I've got the data to prove it. Europe's climate is heating fast. 2024 was a record hot year, punctuated by storms, flooding, and droughts, and characterized by an east-west climate divide. In this video, I'm going to walk you through some brand new data that shows that Europe is the fastest warming continent. I know 2024 feels like a distant fever dream already, but this new report is here to drag us back. It comes from the Copernicus Climate Change Service and the World Meteorological Organization, two organizations that are responsible for monitoring global and regional climate change. And they've shown with data what we knew already. 2024 broke a load of records, and our climate is shifting dramatically, with real consequences for people across the continent. Here to help me make sense of it is Dr. Julien Nicolas, a climate scientist at Copernicus who co-authored the report.
There's a lot of data that go into this report. More than 100 people contribute to this report. It's about 60 types of data sets. The main headline of the report is probably the fact that 2024 was the warmest year for Europe. That's in line with a long-term warming trend. And it happened also in the context of the warmest year also globally. One of the findings of the report is also the contrast that we saw across Europe in conditions such as precipitation. It came with extensive flooding conditions across a large part of the continent. About a third of rivers across Europe.
2024 was Europe's hottest year on record, with yearly air temperatures beating the competition to the top spot over almost half the continent. And in the oceans too, the story was one of heating, with record high sea surface temperatures across the region and temperatures in the Mediterranean a bonkers 1.2 degrees Celsius above average. In keeping with the general polarization between East and West, Europe's climate was also divided by longitude, with hot, dry conditions in the East and warm but wet conditions in the West. In fact, Western Europe saw one of the 10 wettest years since 1950. But climate change is never just about averages, and this report shows just that. Europe's 2024 was all about extreme contrast, with heat waves, floods, storms, and wildfires all making an important appearance. Hot extremes increased, with the second highest number of days with strong, very strong, and extreme heat stress recorded across Europe. July 2024 brought the longest heat wave on record for southeastern Europe, lasting 13 days and affecting more than half of the region. Meanwhile, there were record low numbers of cold extremes, with less than a third of European land area experiencing more than 3 months of frost days. That's a big change considering the figure is usually half of land area. 2024 was both super wet and super dry. It brought the most widespread flooding since 2013, with storms and floods affecting 413,000 people and claiming the lives of at least 335. The storms and floods in Valencia were the most devastating example of this, resulting in hundreds of deaths and over 10 billion euros in damages. But wildfires also affected Europe, impacting 42,000 people. Fires burned at the northern and southern ends of Europe, including in the Arctic tundra and in Portugal, where a quarter of the continent's yearly burn area was burned in just 1 week. All of these extreme events directly impacted ordinary people like you and me.
Overall, what it means for people, for Europeans, is having to face with more extremes of different types, hot extremes, wet extremes, flooding conditions, so heightened climate risk overall.
One of the reasons that Europe is the fastest warming continent is because it includes a lot of the Arctic. The Arctic is warming around 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, causing rapid sea ice loss, melting glaciers, shrinking of the Greenland ice sheet, declining seasonal snow cover, and thawing permafrost.
All European glaciers lost mass in 2024. It was not a record year everywhere. For example, in the Alps, the mass loss was not as large as in 2022, which was really a record year. And the temperature during the summer was not as warm as in other years, so not as much glacier mass loss, but it was a record year for glaciers in Scandinavia and Svalbard. If we look at the sea ice in the Arctic, despite the record high temperatures for the year, for the globe as a whole, it was not a record year for Arctic sea ice. For another part of the cryosphere is the Greenland ice sheet. It was here again, and that was interesting. So in the northern Scandinavia, as well as in the Barents Sea in Svalbard, the summer was record high temperatures. But for the west, over Greenland and the surrounding seas, the summer was not as warm. There was relatively high precipitation, including in the spring. So the Greenland didn't see any significant melt event. So the mass loss was not as high as in other years.
Central European glaciers are shrinking faster than any others worldwide, and the Alps, already unrecognizable compared to the 1970s, are on track to shed half of their ice in the next 25 years. Meanwhile, glaciers in Scandinavia thinned by an average of 1.8 meters in 2024, while glaciers in Svalbard lost a whopping 2.7 meters of height. Both saw their highest loss rates on record during 2024. Across the Arctic, temperatures were much higher than usual last summer, although that was especially true in the Canadian Arctic, northern Scandinavia, Svalbard, and eastern Greenland. You know, all places with a load of ice, usually. In fact, summer 2024 was the third summer in a row where temperatures in the Svalbard archipelago, which is a set of islands at around 79 degrees north, reached a record high. Last time I was there in 2022 was during a record heatwave, where temperatures were a mind-boggling 21 degrees Celsius. You can watch the video I made about it actually up here. Those crazy summer temperatures, combined with drier conditions than usual, sparked Arctic wildfires, which peppered Siberia and northeastern Canada. It also brought lots of snow to the Greenland ice sheet in 2024, which actually offset ice losses. And I don't often get to say that. Sea ice is another important part of the cryosphere, and Arctic sea ice cover at the September minimum was the 7th lowest on record. That trend continued into the start of 2025, with sea ice reaching record low levels at the February winter maximum. In fact, Antarctic sea ice was exceptionally low then too, meaning global sea ice extent hit its lowest ever recorded value. February is normally when sea ice cover reaches its highest point in the Arctic and its lowest point in the Antarctic. The oceans and atmosphere obviously don't give a toss about our human borders, so Europe's climate trends are part of a wider global picture.
2024 for Europe was the warmest year on record. It's part of a long-term warming trend that makes Europe warming faster than the rest of the globe.
Temperatures have continued to tick upwards, and global temperature was higher in 2024 than any other year, reaching an average of 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels for the first time. The multi-year average, which is what's important when we talk about the 1.5 degree target, was 1.3 degrees. Worldwide, the last 10 years have been the hottest 10 years on record. The world's oceans are also heating up, with above average temperatures at the surface of most oceans and rising ocean heat content, even at some considerable depths. This ocean warming, combined with accelerated ice loss from glaciers and ice sheets, drove global sea levels to a new record high in 2024.
The long-term warming trend is very clear. 2024 confirmed that. Europe is warming rapidly. European seas, particularly the Mediterranean, the trend is really unambiguous. Alpine glaciers or glaciers around Europe are losing mass. It's not, even if 2024 was not a record year everywhere, we see a very clear trend toward more solar radiation and toward less cloud. We know that they are contributing also to the warming of the European continent. More solar radiations and less clouds means more heating at the surface, just more extremes year after year, unfortunately. And we know that these extremes climate events are becoming more frequent, more intense. And as the climate continues to warm, we expect them to become even more frequent and more intense, unfortunately.
Trends like these will continue for as long as we carry on heating the planet with greenhouse gas emissions. And the impacts will continue to stack up, generating more risk to lives, livelihoods, and property. Although actions are being taken to make Europe more resilient, including planting trees to cool heatwave-prone cities, boosting renewable energy production, and restoring natural ecosystems to prevent flooding, there is still much to be done.
So there is clearly a need to adapt to this new conditions, adapt to extreme event of different kinds, whether hard extremes or wet extremes and floods.
The challenges that Julien highlights are huge. Adaptation has to be part of the picture, while we also rush to cut emissions wherever we can. And adaptation is sadly going to be even more important while Captain Tango and his fascist robot continue to reverse the limited progress made by our friends over the pond. Climate change is already presenting a huge challenge, and it's just getting harder. I'm really grateful to all the climate scientists who put so much work and effort into reports like these, which analyze an enormous amount of data and allow all of us, decision makers included, to make informed decisions. The data underpinning the report are freely available via the Copernicus Climate Data Store, and if you want to take a look yourself, it's linked in the description. Special thanks to Julien for talking me through the main findings of the report. You can see a longer version of the interview over on my Patreon, completely free. And while you're there, please do consider signing up to become a supporter. It helps me run the channel, which I do completely and entirely in my free time, on top of my full-time job in climate science. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.